yet another pay cut in Medicare reimbursements for physicians.
Matt Venezia is breaking this complicated matter down for you in the newsroom. And Matt, it's looking like something here that people need to know about, and let's talk about who it's impacting the most.
Yeah, exactly that, guys. Another cut incoming for doctors in 2025, just a couple of weeks away now. Now, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is moving along with a 2.9% cut to physician payments as soon as next year. What is really alarming...
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special holiday edition of the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and the listeners of this show have provided some tremendous feedback, and we are going to make an adjustment to the format of the podcast. Our listeners have suggested that the show provide both periodic tips for Chief Medical Officers about what is happening in real time, as well as the interviews, as I did for Hurricane Milton, the IV fluid shortage after Hurricane Helene. While we were building show's programming, I will continue to bring you tips and insights on current events that CMOs may find useful. We will continue to interview CMOs from around the U.S. and provide listeners with their insights, their wisdom, and their favorite leadership tools to help you succeed as a CMO. But when the news creates a ripple for those in a physician leadership role, we will give you brief updates and tips that will give you practical inputs that you can immediately apply in your day-to-day activities. So, in keeping with the holiday season and this special edition of the podcast, please gather around the fire or turn up the heat in your car as you drive around to look at the holiday lights. And please give a listen to this true story. Once upon a time, I was a chief medical officer, and I had responsibility to manage over 100 physician employment agreements for the doctors who worked almost exclusively in the hospital setting. These were the hospitalists, acute care surgeons, trauma doctors, to name a few, and they were all employed by the for-profit medical group in our organization. But as hospital-based physicians, they provided their care inside the not-for-profit world of our hospitals, and I, as hospital division CMO, was given the ultimate accountability for their contracting. Why? It's because under the corporate umbrella, the CFOs and the financial teams of the hospital division and the medical group division had decided that the ways in which revenues and expenses of these physicians would be allocated on the financials, that the hospital division would bear a large portion of these costs. To get into all of that would involve another podcast, so we're going to have to skip those details for now. But back to the story. Given my responsibility for managing the employment contracts for those doctors I just mentioned, it was on my head if we spent too much on the incomes of the physicians relative to the fees that they generated. Now, being who I am, I always argued that the value of those physicians was far greater than the professional billings and collected fees, but those arguments were almost always lost on pure accounting principles, so I was always careful how to manage this element of my responsibility. And one of the ways that I managed this was to ask for and to own the ultimate responsibility for the physician contract renewal process. And since no one likes to negotiate contracts with physicians, I was easily given this opportunity. Typically, the organization determined physician payments and rates against the results of MGMA, Medical Group Management Association, annual surveys of physician compensation, and specifically in our region. And in this particular year of renewal, the compensation survey showed an increase in hospitalist compensation to which we were fiscally unprepared for. There was no specific language within the employment agreements regarding our use of benchmarks, so we legally could have gone in whatever direction we wanted, but that would have been counter to the culture in our prior verbal discussions about how the physician compensation was established at our shop. When this data was made available to me and to my dyad partner who was working with me on this, we quickly realized that any automated pay increase tied to the MGMA survey would cause a significant impact on our financial forecasting within the hospital division, and all eyes would fall on us at the end of the fiscal year, and we would likely have been called out on this blunder. And this is known in management speak as a CLO, a career limiting opportunity. So let me break this down for you in terms of dollars. Let's say I had 60 hospitalist contracts to renew, and they were paid $300,000 as a base. That is an $18 million overall payout on an annual basis for getting benefits. Let's also say that one half of that cost was offset by net collections of those 60 doctors. So we're really only looking at $9 million of expense. And the forecast said that the hospital would spend $9 million on these doctors. But MGM pay went up by 4%. So we were going to have to pay out $360,000 extra dollars if we went along with the MGMA survey. We called for a meeting with the lead hospitalist, and as I recall, there were 4 at one side of the table, and myself and my administrative partner on the other. So we were outnumbered. We shared the 4% increase in the MGMA survey and told them that we did not allocate any pay increase for this year's contract renewal. And as the survey compensations had fallen for the past 2 renewal cycles, we presumed it would fall again given the market conditions. Every contract renewal, we gave a cost of living increase that was provided, and generally speaking, the compensation did not fall, even if regional salaries were falling during the same time. We assumed the same circumstance would happen, so we forecast the same income, aside from the cost of living increase, for the upcoming contract renewal, which we were going through right then and there. When I shared the news that the survey from MGMA showed an increase in compensation by 4%, I boldly told them that we could not increase the base pay by 4% without trimming something else in our hospitalist budgeting, but that in good faith we would give them 3%, which would cost the hospitals about $270,000 and would put about $9,000 into each of the physicians' annual incomes, and try to find ways to manage the financial increase to the hospital cost without any direct impact to the doctors. And we would not ask for anything in return from the physicians either. We would not ask for any increased productivity or take back their CME allowance, all of which was within our rights. We also told them that we would start to consider a 3-year rolling average of the survey data for hospitalists and try to level out any sizable shifts for ourselves as well as for them. This would help us better forecast and would help us avoid any particular jump in any particular year, and we would continue to provide the cost of living bump. We did not speak to the possibility that future surveys might trend down and that one day we might not necessarily avoid any decrease in physician salaries if the trends were to head down. When we met again in 2 weeks, they came back with a counteroffer. They asked for a 2% raise, agreed to the 3-year rolling average as our new benchmark strategy, but also asked that they would not see a drop in income at the next contract renewal. After several more conversations and memos of understanding, and putting all this in writing, we enthusiastically agreed, and they said that our loyalty to them meant more than the 1% we were haggling about. They said they would be willing to take home a smaller than potential raise in order to cultivate more loyalty. We were equally thrilled to have such a partnership. So a happy ending to our holiday story? Yes. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, while this is the end of the story, it is not the end of the podcast. I told you this story for several reasons. First, because this is our holiday show and would be incomplete without a fireside story. Second, because it is the holiday tradition among many faiths to tell stories in order to make sense of things in this world, particularly things from long ago, and to apply them to our understanding of today and to find meaning. So how does this story help us understand today, and how do we find meaning? On Friday night of last week, Congress sent a bill to the White House that did not include any relief for a 2.93% cut in physician fees beginning on January 1st. That's next week. So let me give you a little bit more context as reported by Fierce Health last month. Under the CMS rule, the average payment rates will be reduced by 2.93% in 2025, compared to the average amount those services were paid for most of the calendar year of 2024. And further, this is an actual expiration of a 2.93% bump included in calendar year 2024, required to achieve the neutrality adjustment necessary to account for changes in valuation of particular services. And technically, this drop applies to the CMS conversion factor, or the number of dollars Medicare pays per RVU. So let's just forget percentages for just a moment, mainly because congressional and CMS maths are above my education level. Let's make this simple and look at just the conversion factor. In 2023, the conversion factor was $33.07. In 2024, it was initially decreased to $32.74. And then it was later bumped up to $33.29. And given the bill signed over the weekend that did not do anything with the 2025 ruling, without any other legislation or appropriation bills in this coming February or March of next year, it will be $32.35, which is nearly the same amount at the beginning of 24, which was less than 2023. It gets worse. The AMA points out that while physicians are receiving a 2.8% payment cut from CMS next year, medical practice costs for physicians increase this year by 4.5% and will increase by 3.5% in 2025. Both of these numbers are higher than the average U.S. rates of inflation, by the way. After adjusting for physician practice inflation, Medicare reimbursement to physicians has decreased 29% since 2001, so says the AMA. So if your hospitalists have a census where 60% of the patients are Medicare beneficiaries, and perhaps 20% of those are locked in on an MA plan, let's say 40% of the fees that you can expect to collect from those fee-for-service Medicare beneficiaries, that will drop by nearly 3%. And so in our example above, with the contracting and the dynamics, that roughly would equal about $100,000. And over 20 years, anyone who has been employing physicians has had to manage these annual drops, and adjusting for inflation, this continues to place strain on every stakeholder involved. When you are navigating the choppy waters of what it takes to stay afloat in healthcare today, when $100,000 fails to materialize, that is not a feel-good, happy ending. If you have an entire medical group of, say, 300 physicians who are on average, each are subsidized by about, $225,000, you are now in the realm of providing over $60 million in support. And a drop in Medicare fees will quickly add up to something like $1 million missing from your income statement. And over 20 years, that is relentless. So as your host, and in the spirit of giving, I will offer you 10 gifts for this holiday season, 10 tips for managing these moves by CMS and Congress. Remember, this is for you, the Chief Medical Officer. Number one, as a CMO, make time on your calendar to sit with your CFO as soon as possible, as soon as the holidays are over, and ask to be briefed in on any activities or action plans in response to the financial impact of your organization pending January 1st, or with the expiration of some of the other payments like telehealth or ACO dollars that will expire at the end of March as it stands today. Get up to speed. Some of these impacts may be trivial depending on your unique ecosystem, but they might be huge. Find out. Number two, be mindful that physicians in your domain are hearing the same news as well. So go to the physician lounges and listen. Maybe prompt a question or two. Be the doctor whisperer. Be informed about how they think of the issues. Have they resigned themselves completely? Are they apathetic? Are they angry? Are they wishing to take action? What conversations need to happen at your medical executive committee next week, because the independent docs have been chatting about their incomes going down again just like they have for the last several years? Or what do you need to discuss at your medical staff general meeting or at your town hall? Number 3, find out what your residents are thinking. Get inside that GME world at ground level. Talk to your program directors and your assistant program directors. Talk to the office staff. Are the residents receiving bullets as to their future practice environment from labor organizers? Is this issue being used for political purposes to gain their attention? What will you, as a chief medical officer, need to prep for should they bring the information back up to you? Number 4, make an inventory of contract options for your back pocket. As an employer, can you begin to consider different scenarios to manage lower physician fee collections or the loss of ACO dollars without lowering physician incomes? What substitutes are available without lowering incomes? Number 5, make a little noise. Make sure you are consulted. Are you going to be consulted if your contracting team asks your opinion about removing non-wage income like CME allocation from the physician contracts? Or will they consult you if staffing cuts are made in the office? Would one less medical assistant really matter? Number 6, find out who is poaching. Is the competing health system in town talking to your doctors, offering them income stability, using the narrative of a 3% drop to give them fear? Are they offering them bonuses to switch, increases in income, even willing to support them in a non-compete clause, telling them that their incomes will fall? Number 7, be supportive of political action, regardless of your opinions of the AMA, the AHA, and your professional societies. All of them are of one voice when it comes to the ongoing downward pressure by CMS on fees for physicians and services. If your doctors are active politically, then have open conversations and support them in their desires to push back and at a minimum to have their voices heard. You can remain apolitical but still be supportive of what the physicians want. Number 8, show solidarity. If your physicians have to take a cut in pay as there is no other option, consider this. Maybe you're late enough in your career and have made enough income that you can take the same % drop in your base salary as the employed physicians. Maybe you have another idea, but either way, show solidarity. Number 9, work on your loyalty. Now, as with any other stressors, keep working on your programming, your skills development, your communications, your collaborations to build loyalty with your medical teams, your employed physicians, and your medical staff. Always attempt to be transparent and flexible. Number 10, be empathetic but without platitudes. In times like these, keep pounding on the moral compass of the doctors and feed into any sense of depersonalization and burnout. Find out what you can personally do to help them with their anger and frustration. As Dr. William Osler said, listen to the patient. He is telling you the diagnosis. You might be surprised what you might be able to do at a very personal level to help someone in need. Lastly, although this is not so much a tip, but more of a tactic to increase your value as a chief medical officer in your organization, consider taking ownership of physician contract. Nothing will give you as much street cred, both with the physicians and with your parent organization, than fully participating and outright owning, if you can, this entire process. You must remember to be fair to all stakeholders when doing this, and it is not for the faint of heart. But just as we continue to believe in the beauty of our holiday season, miracles can still happen. I lied. Wait, one more nugget. Not a tactic, not a tip, but a morsel of hope. For those who have been watching Washington, D.C. for the past 30 years, the 119th Congress is just as likely to fix this in February with some appropriations measure, but that is by no means ever a guarantee, and without serious structural reform, I may have to repeat this show next year right about at this time, since the fundamentals will not have changed one bit. If you don't have much to do with physician contracting, and even less to do or less desire to pay attention to what is happening in D.C., but want to learn more about either subject, or if you simply want to know how the money is split up in healthcare, consider this book. the Chief Medical Officer's Financial Primer, written by yours truly. This was written with you in mind, and several topics that I mentioned today, such as the CMS conversion factor, physician employment, and subsidies, are all covered in this easy-to-read and easy-to-understand book. You can order it on Amazon or through the publisher. You can order it on Amazon or through the publisher, the American Association for Physician Leadership. Go to the Amazon website or the AAPL website and order the book. All of the author's proceeds of this book, all of my proceeds, are used in support of this show and its production. In addition to those proceeds, today's show was brought to you by the Otolaryngology Office of Dr. Perry Odontal and Dr. Ginger Vitus, and the financial advising firm of Ilgott and Gaines, and the accounting firm of Loophole and Bernice Documents. A few shout-outs to our show's fashion consultants, Susan Shocks and Natalie Attired, our empathy coach, Enzo What, our fact checker, Ella Fino, and our sound engineer, Phil Denoise. Our next show drops in 2 weeks and will feature a very seasoned CMO from New York City who will share his story about his pursuits in the areas of health policy and healthcare regulations and their impacts on patient outcomes, along with his tactics for dealing with workplace toxicity. You have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the CMO. Want to learn more about what it is like to be a CMO? Want to be on the show? Email me at leescheinbart@gmail.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can listen to the podcast on Apple, and you can also watch videos of the show on YouTube. Our show's website is thefirechief.podbean.com. I love talking with CMOs from all over the United States, so please connect. Leave your reviews and your comments, and please share this with your colleagues. And in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, let's be careful out there.